Hello everyone, welcome to Tuesdays with Trailblazers, brought to you by MarTech Edge, the video podcast where we bring you the latest trends and insights in marketing and technology. I'm your host Siddesh, and today we have with us Katie Miserany, CCO and Global Head of Marketing at SurveyMonkey. She helps shape strategic narrative, drive growth, and ensure clear, compelling communication inside and out, translating vision into execution and connecting the dots between what we say and what we do. So without further ado, let's welcome Katie. Hey Katie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. We're quite excited to see what insights you have for us, Katie.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
So first things first, Katie, I'm sure our audience would love to know your journey and all the ups and downs that came along with it.
Sure. Yeah, like so many people who go into communications, I actually grew up wanting to be a journalist. So I worked at my college newspaper, took a couple jobs after college, ghostwriting for executives, writing for magazines, writing for newspapers, and found my way into a marketing copywriter position at a startup here in Silicon Valley. And that's really how I got my start in marketing. I ended up taking jobs across the gamut of like marketing communications and the creative teams, moving my way up to kind of running integrated marketing at a nonprofit, and then coming over to SurveyMonkey, where I started out in communications, ended up leading that team. And when our most recent head of marketing departed, I was asked to step in and take over leading the combined marketing and communications org.
I mean, that's quite interesting from, all the way from journalism. Now, before we dive in, Katie, I want to start with something that you've said that really stands out. You've described your superpower as orchestrating clarity so teams can move faster, leaders can think sharper, and companies can grow with purpose. So what does orchestrating clarity actually look like on a day-to-day, and why is it a critical skill for modern marketing leaders?
I think when I think about orchestrating clarity, I mostly mean just drawing out of people the ultimate why they're doing what they're doing. So for marketers, a lot of the times it can feel like this team that is a collective of many different channels, many different skill sets, all coming together to try to tell one unified story. And I think too often that gets really siloed, and that creates this representation in the market that's super fragmented. So when we think about clarity as this incredible advantage that teams can have, it's really the hard work you have to do up front to talk about who are we, what are the advantages we have in the market. You can never really play someone else's games. You have to really know what are your advantages, who are your customers, what do they want to hear from you, how can you help them the most, and then ensure that your entire marketing program, everybody knows that cohesive strategy and has the coherence to understand their part in executing that strategy. And that's really hard. And I think too few marketing leaders really take the time to do that step back and think about the platform you're building on top of, and not just the success of each individual channel.
So, Katie, what does disciplined storytelling look like in practice, from strategy all the way through execution?
In my experience, it's really easy to have each channel owner or each leader on your marketing team spin up their own story. So, they're connected by a common understanding of ICP or what your product or service is trying to do in the market, but they can go a little rogue in the execution of that. And so when we think about disciplined storytelling, I think it's really about building upon a shared understanding of the characters in your story, the challenges that they're up against, the feeling that you want your brand to evoke. SurveyMonkey exists in this really interesting prosumer space where we have customers who are professionals, but they often behave like consumers. And that means that we have to speak both languages. You have to do the storytelling and generate the brand love and the loyalty that a consumer expects, but also speak the language of logic and B2B reasoning and ROI and use case specific things, tell them how they're going to be better at their job today because they're using SurveyMonkey. And without discipline, all of the nuances of those messages get lost. So it's really about having the courage to stick to the script and to continue telling your story that is grounded in customer truth and in what your brand can bring to the table, without deviating in these ways that can dilute the message and make it really hard for you to break through.
Got it. Now, You've talked about thinking in systems, not trends. So, how can a brand maintain a consistent, grounded identity while remaining agile enough to adopt or adapt to evolving customer needs as execution becomes increasingly automated?
Yeah, it's interesting to watch the rise of the AI enabled content that is just flooding every platform right now. I think when we talk about systems over trends, it's really about kind of going back to disciplined storytelling. How are you enabling your team with the storytelling platform that is always true about the brand, always true about where your product roadmap is heading? We talk a lot about product-led storytelling at SurveyMonkey, where the product is evolving in these ways that it's going to become easier and easier for people to do the things they want to do inside of our product, whether that's employee engagement or customer listening, NPS, or brand health tracker, which I know is something we might talk about later. It's going to be easier and easier for the customers to do that. So SurveyMonkey then has to build a storytelling platform about our expertise, how 25 years of making the world's most popular survey informed product is enabling us to help you be better at your job. And then how do we pull that through up into what we're talking about prior to people signing up for the product? So that, I think, if you do the hard work of establishing that platform and getting really clear about the system you're architecting and how it all works together, it's almost effortless to identify the trends that you should participate in. So you see something come through on the internet and you're like, should our brand hop on this? It's almost effortless to decide yes or no if you're crystal clear about what is always true for you. And then your team can get really creative and had a lot of fun in translating that into something that's happening in the moment.
Got it, got it. Now, how can marketers tell the difference between building a cohesive narrative that reinforces one clear message over time and simply committing random acts of marketing?
Isn't that great? I love the phrase random acts of marketing. It was coined by Emily Kramer. If you're not following her, she's an excellent follow on LinkedIn. She talks about B2B marketing, but she came up with that term to describe a little bit of what we were talking about around disciplined storytelling, where if you don't have a clear understanding of, she really grounds it in the marketing advantages that you have. So the things that are true about your company, your product, your customer, that are not true for anybody else. If you're not grounding your marketing strategy in that, you will end up committing random acts of marketing that individually may work, but as a cohesive system are not helping you break through and realize that kind of market-wide awareness, consideration, all the great things that come from one cohesive system being out there. So I think random acts of marketing, it's just like a funny, memorable way to think about what we're trying not to do on our team. And the way to build toward not committing random acts of marketing really is that super hard upfront work to align your strategy to exactly what the customers need and want from you, to the opportunity you have, the advantages that you have, and then down to a person in your marketing org, making sure every single person understands how they're playing in that space. So I've been the head of marketing now for going on 4 months. And I was talking to the team this morning and we're still not totally there. You still might see some random acts of marketing coming out of SurveyMonkey, but we're getting closer, we're getting better, we're doing more work that I think is the way I phrase it on the team is we want to be relentlessly helpful to our customers and relentlessly us in the pursuit of being that helpful. So that's the thing that we're really trying to balance right now.
That's quite an interesting take, and I'm definitely gonna, take that suggestion and follow, Emily Kramer. So next thing I wanted to understand, because brands are under pressure to stay consistent while also adapting to changing customer needs. So how can marketers stay grounded in a clear identity while remaining genuinely curious?
We have a really interesting story to tell here because a couple years back, the perception of SurveyMonkey was that we'd been around a long time and a lot of people associated us with a tool that they used in college or a tool that they used early in their career. But we were going into companies and selling these big, like 5-6 figure deals. And the belief on the team was that people didn't want to spend that much money with a company called SurveyMonkey. The name was too silly. The brand was too lighthearted for that kind of really heavy expense. And so we went through all the trouble to rebrand. some of your listeners may remember, we switched to a new name that we thought was a little bit more enterprise adjacent. And when the company went private after being public for several years, the very first thing that the new CEO and the private equity firm wanted us to do was go back to the name SurveyMonkey, which has so much brand equity and so much feel good association with it. And I think it really taps into what we talk about with prosumer and the company, that these are people who have a professional use case, but they behave very much like a consumer, and they want to feel good about the brands that they're interacting with. They want those brands to help them feel something. So I share that example as a cautionary tale of, I think that rebrand was more about what we wanted to do than listening to the customers and hear more about what they wanted. How could we, in their eyes, advance the product to justify a 6-figure deal size instead of changing the name, which is so much just kind of like changing the lipstick on the front of the company. And what I think really empowered the new leadership team to come in and do was listen to customers. So what are customers saying about our offering? What do customers want from us? What is it that differentiates us from the lower end players like Google Forms, which doesn't help you at all? It's a tool that you can use and it's free and it's great for certain use cases. But SurveyMonkey has so much more expertise and so much more data to inform the work that people are trying to do in these various use cases, all the way up to the high-end players, which cost, hundreds of thousands of dollars and have these professional services layers on top of it. So I think it comes down to, in terms of how do you consistently present a brand that people can latch on to while also adapting to the times. It comes down to a lot of customer listening, a lot of understanding what your customers and your prospects are looking for. I actually talked to a CMO recently, and she said that she had a leader early in her career who would literally pull up an empty chair to the table and say, "This is the customer." And throughout the conversation, they would look back at the empty chair and say, but what does the customer want? What is she looking for? How are we helping her do better at her job? How are we telling the story of how we're going to help her? And that was like a really memorable piece of advice, I think. Like that listening to customers is more important than ever. And then, like I said, if you're grounded in what's true and what's real and what's an advantage for you that nobody else has, that nobody else can say they're as good as you at, then you're building from a place of strength, and you can decide to dial up. For us, I mean, like with the name SurveyMonkey, I think our instinct was to shy away from the monkey part because it's playful and could read as silly or unserious. But at the end of the day, that's brand differentiation. And if we don't pay off the name and make it make sense in our marketing, then we're leaving some equity on the table. So we're doing that work to figure out, when do we dial up like the little bit of mischief that comes with the monkey name, or the little bit of like, you can be an agitator with SurveyMonkey because you notice something, you're relentless about finding the data to back it up, and then you can make a real impact and change the trajectory of your business if you have the right information. So figuring out how to tell that story and really have the strong foundation, so then you can jump into the various trends presented to you in a way that makes sense and is going to be coherent to your audience.
Makes perfect sense, and totally in agreement with you. And I actually followed you guys from a brand perspective as well. And personally, if you ask me, I like the name SurveyMonkey more. And the monkey term actually adds more playfulness and more mischief, like you said. So it kind of has a good ring to it anyways.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. I feel like very tender toward the name SurveyMonkey. I think we do it a disservice if we try to ignore that we're named something kind of silly from the early days of the internet.
Absolutely. So our audience would love to know, how do we move trust from being a vague feeling to a tangible business metric?
It can be vague, right? It can feel like a kind of thing that maybe customer support is like, people don't trust us. And it's easy for the exec team to be like, what does that even mean? What we do as a team is we have a brand health tracker that we put out in the field 4 times a year. And we have to white label it, because if we ran it on SurveyMonkey, like other companies do, people would know. But we really try to dig in on not just awareness, but what do people feel about the brand? And are we considered more of a functional brand where they associate us with just getting a job done? Or do they have a sense of what we stand for, who we are as a company, like how we pay off the monkey name and get really playful with it? So we ask questions about not just awareness, but the perception on key attributes that we really care about, like trustworthiness, or is it a modern platform? Do people feel like we're relevant to their work life and the things that they're trying to achieve? So by tracking that every quarter, we actually present out on it at the executive level. We bring that information to the board. We share it with the entire company just to help keep a pulse on how trust is playing out in the market when it comes to our brand, and if there are specific things we can do to move the needle. So a great example is, to move the needle on trust, we actually did what we were calling a lightning strike in the UK last year. At the same time, they had South by Southwest in London. They had London Tech Week. We have a lot of customers there. We had a great relationship with a PR agency in the UK. And we put all this together to create this moment where people traveling in and out of London could see a lot of advertising about the fact that SurveyMonkey itself is GDPR compliant. And we have a European data center. So we know customers in that geo care a lot about privacy and how responsible we're being with their data, especially in the age of AI. They want the companies that they partner with to be responsible agents in this space. So we put out a messaging blitz and sent the CEO. He was on tons of podcasts. He was talking on the news. It got syndicated. It was, we had ads in the airport. We had ads blanketing the city. I think we even did like a geofence Uber and Lyft ad. So if you're moving around inside of London during these peak travel times, you would see our ads. And then we could measure through the brand health study the lift in that geography before and after we ran this messaging campaign about our GDPR compliance and the ways that we were protecting customer data and taking privacy and security really seriously. So by having that measurement and that ongoing every 4 months, every 3 or 4 months, we get the set of data again, it enables us to see the output of our efforts where that's not necessarily going to show up in the number of signups that we're generating or the number of leads that we're capturing for sales. So it's a great in-between metric to help you keep track of how things are going on a more consistent basis as you're trying to architect a perception shift.
Got it. Now, why will having one clear message reinforced everywhere outperform multi-campaign strategies in 2026?
I think this comes back to the way that AI has flooded all of our platforms and the reliance on AI to write content, to draft messaging, to, help accelerate marketing efforts has created this real flattening of affect. So it's hard to differentiate, ChatGPT is writing my byline and yours. Our voice will get flattened into the same kind of ChatGPT lingo as much as we work with it and try to what happens is that sameness is just read as noise in the market. And if you can do the hard work to architect your basic storytelling platform, you know what you mean to people, you're really hammering those messages everywhere you have the opportunity to, you actually have a chance of breaking through the sameness and the noise, because, there's the age-old thing in communications where you have to say something 10 times before people even start hearing it. Now that's even worse because everyone's saying things hundreds of times and they're changing it all the time. And how does your message have any hope of breaking through? It just has to be consistent across all those platforms. And it's harder, again, not just for the upfront, we have to get the strategy right, but if your message is off and you're putting it everywhere, then you're making a bet. And that bet could be wrong. And that's where it comes back to how much customer listening are you doing? How well do you understand the advantages that you have? And then you can capitalize on that to really punch through that layer of noise that's just taking over every single channel now.
Now, how can real-time research and feedback loops help brands understand when trust is being built, when it is broken, or when it's going to be repaired?
This, again, I think comes back to, in our experience, this has been where that brand health tracker is so incredibly helpful because you have this always on listening mechanism out there in the market. You obviously have signals as well from your various social platforms. You get it through review sites that are going to have a point of view on how you're doing. You get it through your customer support teams or your customer success teams, the sales teams that are living in the deals every single day and facing the pressure from customers. It's really about pulling all of that together to help you understand the signal. And I think the piece that people can often forget about, they feel like they're pulling up the chair for that customer, they're listening to CS, they're listening to support, they're listening to sales, but are they listening to the market, to the prospects. I think that's been harder. And social media can be so noisy, and depending on where you're looking, it can be
Absolutely.
partisan here in the United States, or like someone could just create a campaign against you. A lot of the consumer brands have faced that this past year. We have a whole Trends 2026 report that explores some of the ways that people are responding to that. But what it really comes down to is pulling up a chair for the prospect. Like the customers there, you have the channels for listening to them. How are you listening to the market and to the prospects who are going to be your next customer? That's where I think brand health is such a critical thing to both track and then elevate and talk about internally, so that the entire company can align around, this is where we're going to shine, is by breaking through on these key attributes that we want to be known for.
It makes perfect sense. Now, Katie, let me ask you this. If you had to prioritize one capability for future-ready marketing teams, what would like be, right? And why exactly?
That's a big question. I would have to go with clarity and systems that drive you toward clarity. I think it's still all too rare, and even more important when we try to think about telling disciplined storytelling out in the market, having every channel amplifying the same key attributes that you want to put out there, listening for those key attributes in your brand health tracker or other listening mechanisms. If everyone isn't crystal clear on who you are and what you're doing as a team, that's all going to be a lot harder. So as much as I want my team deeply engaging with AI and figuring out how to use it to do the rote tasks that we don't need to be doing by hand anymore, I'm also equally interested in how we're coming together as a team and architecting our systems to build that clarity. I think it's harder than ever. It's more important than ever. And it's something that the teams that win this year are really going to focus on.
And finally, I mean, this is something I'm keenly looking forward to your answer, to be honest. So what will customers reward more in the coming years? Is it innovation, efficiency, or empathy? And how should brands balance all three?
That's so tough. I think that I like the balance part of the question, because you need all three. There's no way you're getting by without all of them. Let's see. So innovation, empathy, or agility, was that the last one? Efficiency. I'm going to go with, I think, as number one, because innovation and efficiency without that is going to lead you to have a very functional relationship with your customers, and one that is easily disrupted by competitors. So if you're only focused on innovation and efficiency, that is a weak bond. If you're focused on empathy first, and then you build your innovation and efficiency systems around empathy for your customer, for the prospect, the people you're trying to help, that is loyalty. And I think that is what all of us are looking for here in 2026, is you don't want a customer to sign up with you just because they're like, I guess this is good enough. You want them to be like, let's go. I'm going to have a great year thanks to SurveyMonkey, thanks to, whatever your company is. And so that's what, I would put that as number one. I think that's really hard, and I think you have to balance them all, but empathy, number one.
I was just going through a report which was more detailed towards how our brands are investing in terms of, how brands are investing towards brand awareness or brand as recognition, compared to demand. And the report said that, if they have a budget of 100%, they're usually investing about 25% to brand, because it doesn't correlate to pipeline that much compared to demand. So what is your view on it? Why exactly there's a stark difference, and why exactly, if you believe that, there should be more investment in brand, and how you can tie it down directly to revenue to make sure there's more investment out there?
I think it comes down to the strength of your relationship with the CFO, really. You need to make the CFO your best friend, and then you need to teach that person how this all works. So it is attractive to invest in the bottom of the funnel, because you feel that satisfaction of like, we put out $1, we made 10. And the thing is that you run into diminishing returns there. So there is no world in which you can only play at the bottom of the funnel. You have to expand to that top of funnel, to the either awareness or investing more in getting people to your website, or, even the like conversion journey that they're taking through your website to understand your product, to learn something, to feel something toward your brand. And the key that I found for CFO is you explain the leading indicators on that expense at the top of the funnel that will help you turn it into demand that you can capture later on. So it's really about generating demand, whereas bottom of the funnel is about capturing the demand. I do think the brand health tracker is really helpful for this too. I know I've talked about it a lot today, but it is a way to capture a leading indicator on this is how perception is changing.
We're kind of moving towards a brand-led demand thing, right? So, what according to you is how can we maximize on this? I mean, if you were like you're at a position where you can actually maximize brand-led demand. So, for all the budding marketers out there moving towards brand-led demand, what would be your tips and tricks be, or would what your 2 cents be about brand-led demand?
Great question. I think about it, you have to break it down into at the top of the funnel, when you're talking about brand investment, you're trying to generate demand. And at the bottom of the funnel, you're capturing it. So if you have the system really well set up to capture the demand, that's where you would start. You would want to make sure that, you've got your paid search and your lower funnel SEO terms, and you've got systems for pulling that demand through. You want to make sure you have a great website and a great sign up experience. Then you can start investing higher up in the funnel to try to generate the demand within your customer base that's going to pull those through. And this would be about understanding the void that you fill in people's lives. So if you're a painkiller, what is the pain that they are trying to avoid by bringing your solution on, and educating people about that and trying to mean something to them in daily lives. Something like a brand health tracker can help you track that along the way and see how you're doing in that journey. And you can also track things like, is direct traffic increasing? So people are just coming straight to your site now that you have billboards, or now that you're doing ads on Amazon Prime Video or YouTube or something. Is your direct traffic increasing? Do you see branded searches? So people are searching for your company name. Those can all be great leading indicators to help you measure how effective that's all going. But I think the thing that underpins it all, and what we've talked about a lot today, is how strong is that story that you're telling? How much do you understand the people you're trying to serve, so you can tell a really clear, crisp story across that journey?
Got it. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Katie. I think this was some wonderful insights, Katie. I really enjoyed hosting you on our podcast, Tuesdays with Trailblazers. And thank you all for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time, stay tuned with MarTech Edge for more insights. Meet again. Signing off, your host, Siddesh.